Coverkiller Nation, is a great day to be a metal fan. Welcome! It is now time for another album review. But this is going to be more than just an album review. You're going to want to stick around until the end for this, because I have a proposal. I have a proposal to make, and it's not only going to be based around this video, but it's also going to be based around the next video. But let's get to this one. It's now finally time. As the description up above, or the title of the video rather up above in the description below, have informed you, before I myself have here on camera, we are reviewing The Electric Age by Overkill. Now if you don't know who Overkill is, what rock have you been hiding under? Especially if you're a metal fan. These guys are one of the most important thrash metal bands of all time. Not to mention they earned my top spot for my favorite 1980s thrash metal band. And this is a band that is now entering their fourth decade, or should I say already entered into their fourth decade, with the release of Ironbound 2 years ago, with The Electric Age now being the follow-up to that thrashterpiece. A thrashterpiece that was very, very high up on the 2010 Album of the Year list. Now will The Electric Age be able to measure up? Will The Electric Age be able to maybe supplant that and make it to number one? Well, the only way to do that, the only way to find out, is to listen. After listening to this record, I have mixed feelings. But my mixed feelings are this. I don't know if it's going to have the number one spot because this year's only 3 months in. However, I do know that this is definitely on par with Ironbound's thrash-tastic experience of 2010. There are moments on this album where you almost forget that Bobby Blitz Ellsworth and the guys from Overkill have entered into their fourth decade. Especially Bobby. With Bobby's voice still going strong, and with him still uttering shrill screams that seem inhuman, ungodly, just ridiculous, you forget about the fact that he's been doing this since the early 1980s. These vocals are once again just as intense, just as flavorful, just as absolutely over the top as it has been in years. And Overkill's not a band that needs to necessarily use the tricks of the trade, the modernizations of a new technological age, in order to really amplify the ridiculosity, the sheer magnitude, the sheer shrilliness of Bobby Blitz's vocals. Attend an Overkill show, and you'll know exactly what I mean. These are things that are just as legitimate live as they are in the studio. So you need not wonder if this is just some sort of studio magic. Electric Age is filled with 10 songs, a nice blend. However, thrash is once again the 100% calling card. If you remember that I reviewed Overkill's first single off of this album, Electric Rattlesnake, about a month or so ago. And if you remember what I said that it seemed as though what the band was doing was blending the old with the new. Taking the ideas that were explored upon on Ironbound from 2010 and perhaps in a couple of the records that preceded it, and mishmashing it together with 1980s style, good old-fashioned thrash motherfucking metal. This whole album is chock full of this idea. This is not something that is just a one-song experiment. This is instead something that whenever they went into the studio and wrote these sessions, whenever they went into the studio with these tracks perhaps penned, with these riffs already concocted, and they were merely meeting the minds to see which songs were going to make it to the record, to see which ones perhaps weren't good enough, and to see how these tracks were going to evolve into thrashterpieces. This was a philosophy that perhaps, without even thinking about it, was instilled. A culture that was developed. And this album displays it beautifully. No, Electric Rattlesnake is merely just the beginning. This is a 10-track affair that takes you through many, many ups, very few downs, and just keeps you going. There are very few moments on this album where the pace slows up. And whenever the pace slows up, it's only for a brief moment, such as the introduction to the final track on the album, Good Night. Now the reason why this has to happen is because of something that I call the last track rule. I think the last track of an album should always have something new, fresh, experimental, unlike anything that you hear on the rest of the record. Something that really offers something kind of cool. And Good Night really does boast that. Now some people may look at Good Night as a swan song of sorts. People might get concerned that Good Night is actually a way for Bobby and the boys to say this is it. But no, friends. No, coverkillernation. This is not what's going on. Especially considering Overkill has been creating consistent and consistently better thrashterpieces as time has developed. I still remember the times from the 1980s. I wasn't a fan then because I was merely 4 or 5 years old. Whenever albums such as The Years of Decay came out, Taking Over, things like that. Songs such as Wrecking Crew, songs such as End of the Line, In Union We Stand, The Years of Decay, Hello from the Gutter. And just thinking to yourself, this is amazing. This is the classic era. I can still remember in the 1990s, whenever I first got into this band in the latter part of the 1990s, where perhaps the band had a bit of a fluctuating lineup, and maybe the albums to some may seem inconsistent. But I remember this band always delivering me something that was unexpected, and were always consistently amongst my favorites. And then I remember hearing them in the 2000s, how reinvigorated they consistently sounded, how they were consistently able to push the envelope, and how Bobby just never seemed to vocally age. And now we reach 2010, and it continues. It's incredible that this band continues to not only write meaningful and good thrash music, but consistently get better. So this is my plea. This is my plea for this album that has really reached a 9 out of 10 on my scale. Unseen heights thus far this year. My plea is this. On release week, I'm not even going to say release day. I'm not going to say on March 27th. I'm going to say between March 27th and the early part of April, during that 1 week stretch. Don't download this album. Go out and purchase it. Make stores be forced to get more of it in. Make stores have to get more and more copies of this in. That way more of you can buy it. I want to be able to put this out on the top 20 list. In fact, I want this to sell through the roof, because this is an album that damn well deserves it. And Overkill's a band that damn well deserves it. I want to be able to put a lot of metal on the top 20 list at my store and have it happen at other stores, nationwide, worldwide, the week after March the 27th, which is early in April. I think it's April the 2nd. Because I think this is something, this is an album, along with the Borknagar album that I just reviewed, and amongst the other albums that are going to be released this week that I'm about to review, that really deserves it. This is a spellbinding release. Does it top Ironbound? It's hard to tell. These two are almost neck and neck. Right now I'd say Ironbound has the slight advantage. But that's not a bad thing. The Electric Age is a fitting follow-up. One that definitely deserves to be in your collection. And definitely one that deserves to be in your collection in a physical regard. Not just existing as a folder on a computer screen. Take care.